everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, joined by Alyssa Gursky. How are you today?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been too long. I don't think I've seen you in person. And did I see you this summer at MAPS?
Okay, no, but I saw you at Horizons
Horizons
in the
Portland.
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, that
Yes.
was fun. I had a good time there. It was lovely seeing you as always. So I guess let's rewind the tape. Like, we got to meet up years and years ago. I think you were an early guest on Psychedelics Today. We talked about your ketamine protocol. I think you were one of the first people I knew doing CAP, which is really cool. And I think it was at the time that you were a student at Naropa, but also doing kind of night attendant stuff as part of a MAPS clinical trial. Is that right?
Yeah. So by the first time I was on this podcast, I must have been going through ketamine-assisted psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
But I had designed for myself, because I was in my graduate program, I convinced Naropa to let me count ketamine therapy as my required therapy hours. And at that time, they were still anti-psychedelics and whatever. I don't have to die on that hill right now. Um, I had designed a protocol for myself
Mm.
to use the creative process to support my journey. And I believe that's really what we talked about. But I've been beating the same drum this whole time. Yeah, I started as a night attendant when I was still in my undergraduate degree at Naropa. And I have been inseparable from psychedelics ever since. I'm going on my 10th year of commitment to this work.
What made you interested? Like, I assume you were still back in New York when psychedelics came on your radar. Is that right? Like, what was it about the topic that really kind of caught your interest?
You know, I was in a place where I had already been getting my BFA at that point. So I was doing like a BFA, BA hybrid in art therapy and in studio arts, and I was figuring out what direction to go. Massively depressed, severe social anxiety to the point that like looking people in the eyes used to stress me out. And then a dear friend of mine, who I actually am still friends with to this day, also lives in Oregon, so cool, was like, you should try mushrooms. I think she was seeing me sort of get into that depressive, real self-loathing spiral and was like, just give these a try. And I was like, I already smoke weed. That sounds great. Did the classic thing of, oh, you're just supposed to take all of them, right? So my first experience was an eighth of mushrooms, and I felt my body for the first time. And I just remember having the thought of, oh, this is the rest of my life. Like, tangibly, I have never felt ease before after many years of just being exposed to a lot of trauma, a lot of medical trauma from my parent, and just like a lot of tumultuousness. And it completely changed how I looked at myself and my brain. And there was just no other choice. And I still feel that way, that like there's this divine tapping on my shoulder, and I feel so much more like a parent to psychedelic art therapy than like the ego identity. I think that gets really confusing when I'm like, it's not mine. I have to brand it as mine so people know where to find me, but like humbly it is not mine. It chose me, and I'm just I'm just its little puppet, you know?
So you were already doing therapy training at that point, art therapy training at that point before you had that
Hmm.
dose? Yeah. Um, yeah, there's a quote that I love here, 1965, Tim Leary, about his first mushroom experience. I learned more about his brain and its possibilities and more about psychology in the 5 hours after taking these mushrooms than the preceding 15 years of studying and doing research. And I feel like that's like it makes the material come alive. And it also like,
Yeah.
oh, that's short-sighted. This is actually a broad vista. And then there's so much
Yeah.
more here, right?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, so 10 years ago, it's 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I'm old. Hello, that hit me. It's 2014. Psychedelics are not popularly talked about. I have the most supportive parents. And they were like, do what you want with your life, do what makes you happy. And then I tell them that I want to be a psychedelic therapist and an art therapist. They were like, dear Lord, you have pushed the envelope of what that phrase meant. But yeah, I think there was something for me. I used pastels pretty much the entirety of that whole first experience. And I was just so stunned at how much more freedom. Like there were concepts that I was learning that like your creative process is a reflection of your mind. And I felt like there was an observer really present to where I remember drawing and there wasn't this judgment of, well, what is this going to become? And what am I doing with this? And should I have used that color? Like this deep, neurotic, judgmental inner voice. But instead, it was just sensation. I was listening to a guided meditation this morning, and this woman said something to the tune of, you can't fully feel sensation in your body and think at the same time. And that's actually why so many guided meditations bring you to that somatic sensation, because that's a whole other field of existence. And psilocybin just really dampened that inner narrative enough to where I could actually feel, like capital F, feel sensation. Yeah, really precious.
Right. And for those who don't really get it yet about like somatic sensations, intelligence, etc., there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, right? There's so much stored in the body, like every insult you've ever had, like every bump and bruise, surgery, whatever, internalized insult of any kind, it holds on. And if we're not feeling our body, well, not only are we ignoring a gigantic part of our being, we're missing a lot of our past and present too.
I think the last sentence that you said is like I would highlight and underline that when we're not taking the time to process through what is in our bodies, we start to lose the ability to be present. And I think that our culture doesn't really have a fantastic container for what that means, like what it means to be in expressive practices. And part of the joy in my private practice is helping people figure out, what are you already doing that's working, right? Like, I didn't think of rock climbing. Like, I'm obsessed with rock climbing.
Yeah, I saw
And
you
I
started
didn't,
picking that up a lot lately. It's awesome.
yeah. We love a pandemic hobby. It's so funny being in a fat body and then having ripped arms. It always catches people off guard, and I'm
Did you
so
say you
here
were
for
climbing
it.
5'10" recently?
Okay, so I top out at 5'9",
Mm-hmm.
but still, 2 years ago I was climbing 5'4s. So
It's monster progress. 5'9s are not easy,
yeah,
everybody, if you don't know climbing very well.
they're
Nice
not.
work.
No, it's real work, but it's such a fun puzzle. It's such a fun puzzle. But I didn't at first think of it as, oh, this is like a somatic healing practice and helping people figure out that, like, yeah, walks with your dog, you are being present, you're being in your body. Guess what? That counts. I think there are a lot of ways that, like, the highest level is like somatic therapy, dancing, breath work, movement. But there are actually like all these little subtle ways that we are taking care of our bodies and our nervous systems that we don't know how to flag. So that
Mm-hmm.
just came up for me as well. That like it doesn't, for people who are unfamiliar or who find certain practices inaccessible, there are a lot of things that humans already do that fall into the category of nervous system regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if my climbing career like helped me through. um, I had to stop; my arms fell apart. But like all through high school, college, like we had a world class climbing destination like 10 minutes from school, so that was almost every day when the season was good. And yeah, I think there was a
Wow.
lot I worked out on the wall, in tandem with my
Right?
Holzberg breathwork practice and all that other fun stuff I had going.
Oh my gosh, we could actually just have a whole episode about
We have
rock
other stuff we
climbing.
need to get into. Let's do
I
somatics
know.
deeper later. So let me throw another
Yeah,
curveball
please.
for you. When did Jodorowsky show up for you?
Please. Oh, my heart and soul. I love that pivot. Um, I was coming down from an LSD experience with a sweetie of mine at the time. And he said, so we're talking, I lived in Boulder. I know the apartment I lived in. 2016.
Hmm.
2016. And he said, can I show you a really important movie? And I was like, fuck yeah. And then I saw the Holy Mountain coming down from maybe 300 micrograms.
That's a big experience.
Yeah, so Jodorowsky, he's an immensely controversial figure. I never want to negate that. There are some people who find him so difficult, but I am stunned by teachers who are willing to hold almost the archetype of the devil, where they will rest in the underworld. And of course, it's so easy to get lost in the hall of smoke and mirrors in the underworld. But they're willing to actually do the work for the collective of alchemizing what's in there. And just the journey that he had of such trauma and using creativity to transmute that. Uh, I think that there's something really to say about public figures who are willing to just bare their whole heart and soul and do that work. I think another huge inspiration for me in my like unabashedly authentic chaos demon version of myself that I'm really working to make sacred space for in my professional identity is Genesis Peorage. Do you know about
Woo!
Genesis?
Love Genesis. I talked to Zach Leary.
Oh
Did you know
yeah.
Zach was close family friends with Genesis?
Yes, I did know that through Genesis's memoir.
Whoa. I need to read that memoir.
So, oh my gosh, it is the easiest read. I took it to a hot springs and I devoured it in 2 days.
Hmm.
So good. But another incredibly controversial person who was so sensitive and so willing to push the envelopes of using creativity as a vehicle for transmitting something, for transmuting something.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So Yorovsky, Genesis, like just I love true freaks in nature.
And it was like, um, so Genesis was an early pioneer in a lot of things. Um, and then Jodorowsky also, right? Like this whole concept of like psychodrama, I think got really developed by Jodorowsky in some interesting ways. I think it existed elsewhere before, but you know, being able to play those things out, um, quite stellar. And yeah, let's just say let's have people go check these two out on their own. We don't have to go too deep on that,
Yeah,
but it's something I was always interested in your activity, like being deep with Jodorowsky at the very least.
yeah. Well, so I think there's a really interesting pivot point there to a topic that we sort of named as an important theme for us, that being community and group, and for me, ritual. And I'm sure you as well. There's this essence in psychomagic that is so much about what you just said, that embodying, that making the invisible visible, and being able to do that in community and be witnessed in that, and to offer other people the gift of allowing your story to take up space, allowing your pain to take up space. That I think is stunning. Uh, I'm sure my bio will be gone over, but the research lab that I get to work at, the Social Neuroscience and Psychotherapy Lab, the Portland VA, um, Dr. Christopher recently said to me, groups sort of shift when you just see them as psychodrama, when you can just see a group environment as a sort of theatrical experience.
Yeah, that's a fun lens to put on a social situation. Um, yeah, and I think in our like we probably exist in pretty strange communities, right? Like I know I do, and like watching how people act in
Without
those
a
environments is
doubt.
so fucking funny, and like yeah, there is a lot of that for sure. Um, both good and bad, or I
Yeah.
guess like helpful and unhelpful for them. Maybe we'll put it that way.
And I think that the framing, especially as the role of facilitator,
Hmm.
lands for me because it can be so easy to be like, okay, wait, what's happening here? But to rest and to look and to be like, wait, hold on. There's actually a theme playing out here. There's a storyline and there's an arc. And how can I pay attention to that? Like that mindset, I feel like just helps me drop in to the witnesser role and helps me get out of Alyssa and more into that, that psychedelic wisdom of the witnesser.
I like that. So, my orientation, Kyle's orientation, we have a lot of background with holotropic breath work. So Groff's the Groff's both decided group process should be a key part. And I find it endlessly valuable. It's a great place to reflect off people. It makes the groups feel a little less hierarchical, like, do I really want some sort of guru magician like running the show for me? Not necessarily every time. I think I like the feel of a peer-based experience more so than like, let me follow your rules the whole time. Yeah, like what do you think about, how do you like to think about group experiences and like why they're helpful, and maybe like how it's informing how you're looking at ketamine for groups?
I can't remember who says this phrase, but somewhere along my many years of psychedelic training, I heard someone say that we're wounded in community, we're healing community. It could be Gabor Mate. It could
Right.
be.
Sounds like something you might say.
Could right? It sounds
Hmm.
like something he might say, and I'm not going to Google it right now.
If someone
So
catches us, just tweet at us, please, or whatever you want to do.
honestly, please, I love being told that I'm wrong. It's so good for me.
It's the fastest way to find out if you're wrong is put it out on the internet. People will correct you right away.
Oh my God. Okay, so groups. So for me in the last couple of years in private practice, I've been focusing a lot on the LGBTQ community. As a queer person myself, I feel like it's so important to have affinity spaces. So to speak specifically to that population, because that's what I do in private practice, and that's also the clinical trial that I'm a study therapist and a research associate on. There's something about the natural guard that is up for people who are members of the LGBTQ community. And this can apply to any marginalized community, affinity group, that there is just something where you know that every person in the room gets you in some way. That my pronouns are probably going to be, hopefully, going to be gotten correct. And I'm not going to be misgendered, or I'm not going to be put in a specific box. And that actually can open up so much space for people. The core textbook for me in graduate school around group psychotherapy gave these, I think they're like 10 or so principles of why are groups healing. And though one of the principles being universality, like just realizing that other people are having a lived experience that relates to mine.
Mm.
Uh, and that is so precious. Now, so that's one piece of groups that matter a lot to me. And two is the creative piece. I think that so many people experience trauma in really formative developmental years. They could be, minor attachment ruptures, experiencing collective trauma, global trauma, interpersonal trauma, and bringing people back to being in an open, expanded, altered state and making art quietly with 8 other people does something for the system. The corrective experience of that person right there is going to tend to all my needs. My only job is to be free and be with my inner world and to see other people. There's something about the creative process. So similar to what I was talking about with my experience on psilocybin with art making, watching that happen for other people of not, I feel like normally when I'm just doing an art integration group, for example, people can be like, I see what that person's doing and like, that's really cool. And I could never do that. But in groups, there's so much more creative risk taking or creative exploration, or people who are normally quiet getting to find a way to express themselves that meets them at their needs. Because often there are some people who don't want to talk. For many years, that was me. And in how many academic settings did I get forced to read out loud? Did I, have to do public speaking before I was ready? Like, it's mind blowing to me that I'm actually choosing to do this right now. But I think there's so much space for corrective experience. And I am completely in line with you that I I don't, I, I like the term facilitator. I think it has a way more equal playing field. I'm about to launch a peer support or like a peer consultation group that's focused on teaching people different ways to use the artistic process in their whatever the practice is. If they're therapists, if they're underground therapists, if they're guides, like whatever they want to call themselves, if they want to use creativity, um, that's what I want to teach people. And there's something about it being peer support where I am gathering and I'm holding the space and I have the expertise, but you're the expert in you. Take this tool and let's use this as a lab. I think that sort of leadership is so challenging the patriarchy and challenging so many systems of hierarchy. So that was a bit of a circuitous journey to my thoughts and beliefs on group, but
Well, let's go back to here. So, like, yes, we believe in groups quite a bit, right? Like, people can heal each other. This is a fundamental. I wish I wasn't going to be like Leary hyping the whole time, but like this, Leary was an early pioneer of group therapy, and he got a
sure
lot of
was.
shit from the establishment for it. And I think it was just this push towards more democratic form of healing, as opposed to like, let me go to the magician with the white coat that can give me some pills or run some current through my
Yeah.
brains or something, right? Like, let's actually heal together. Um, like, what do you think it is about that challenges clinicians, like the establishment, wherever like this stuff pops up? Like, what is it? Just like a financial risk, or is it more than that?
So I think that some people's nervous systems on a base level do not know how to attune to 8 or 9 people at once. So I think that can just be a fundamental barrier. Paying attention to that many people, tracking that many processes, some people just aren't built for it.
As a professional,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
But I think, sort of, just make sure I'm understanding your question. Were you asking me
Like, what is
why
it about
certain
group
people?
therapy that, like, what is it in particular about group therapy that makes the establishment kind of push back? And
That's
maybe
a
let's not even say group therapy because it's kind of a licensed thing, right? Let's say like group process generally, and maybe like unlicensed group process.
yeah. Oh gosh. Okay, so this can so easily slip down a really conspiracy theory adjacent rabbit hole, and we're gonna tiptoe so gently. Um, I think that oppressive systems benefit from when humans are in isolation. I think that I mean, there's so much to say there, but I think that there
Hmm.
is an immense amount of systems of oppression, yeah, that really benefit from when we're in isolation. And I think that that feels like my succinct answer.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like capital, capitalism generally. Like, let's spend more because we're lonely, or yeah, get sick more because we're lonely. Stuff like that. Like, it's a big thing.
We're also not having models for things like self regulation, not having models. I can't tell you how many times in a group I have had one person start wailing. And the room is pretty quiet before them. But then after that one person has engaged in risk taking, maybe somebody is disturbed and needs to move to a quiet sensory space. But maybe other people then start vocalizing and moving and expressing themselves. I'm sure you've seen this as well, that there's the bravery of a couple of people that really can shift the group dynamic. And of course, that can go in many different directions, but there's so much permission and modeling that can happen in that group space. The validation of, yeah, it makes sense why you're upset about that, but not coming from the therapist who has that inherent place of power or the facilitator, because
Mm.
I don't believe that therapists are the only people who should facilitate. So I want to make sure that that's not the dominant language I'm using. If a
Thanks for saying that out
facilitator,
loud.
oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I don't think that psychedelics are just meant for therapy. I don't think that therapists are the only facilitators, and psychedelic exceptionalism can absolutely bite me. There we go.
So how do you like to define psychedelic exceptionalism? and we'll try to get back on track
Um,
after this.
we've so got this. I really believe in us. So the phrase, I want to make sure that I'm giving Dr. Carl Hart the honor that he deserves because he is a prolific educator, researcher, author, truly um, such a legend.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know his exact definition off the top of my head, but my general understanding of it is that it is a bias and a belief that psychedelics are superior to things like, other prescription medications, methamphetamine, heroin, opiates, that there's a moral superiority, that there are good drugs and that there are bad drugs. And typically, lots of people in the psychedelic community will say that, like, ayahuasca is medicine, mescaline is medicine, cannabis is medicine, but people who need prescription medications are problematic. And I will use any platform I'm given to be abrasive in that because it's just violent. It's so violent and it's so boring. Yeah, that's
I've
my hot
stopped
take.
communicating with so many people in the past year or probably 5 years who just like can't get over themselves in that way. I'm like, there's one person who's following the Colorado situation, like all the laws developing, very explicitly told me they are a psychedelic exceptionalist. And then they started throwing all sorts of like drug policy alliance conspiracies at me. I'm like, bro, you're talking to the wrong person. I
You're
I thought you might actually
absolutely
know my stance. Uh,
yeah.
but he did not. And I bailed. And I'm just like, I can't. I'll educate you for about 4 minutes and then go read the effing book, right? Like, drug use for
Yeah.
grown-ups and high price are great foundational material for
Oh
improving your
my God,
positions.
yeah. Is High Price, is that Johann Hari?
High price is Carl Hart's first. And then
Okay,
drug
wait.
use for
There's
grown-ups is
another.
second. Johann Hari is
Oh,
Chasing the Scream, the one you're probably
Chasing the
thinking of.
Scream.
I think those
Yes,
are a
that
good
is.
trifecta to
Yes.
understand the
Holy
drug
Trinity.
war. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I heard there's some ways in which Johann Hari's works are a little controversial, but I'm just whatever. I'm just go read it, everybody. It's important, um,
Yeah.
for sure. Despite that,
Yeah. I think that there's there's many psychedelic professionals that do a great job at holding the seat of plant medicine people. And, for transparency's sake, the medicine that I feel the most connected to on like my personal healing is mescaline, and I love it like it's my own grandfather.
mm.
But so I do have that bias of, but I also love mescaline hydrochloride, so whatever. Um, there are people who hold the seat of plant medicine. These are how I am of service, and these are the communities that I want to uplift and protect. And I respect those people to the end of the earth. But when there is not that wiggle room of, yeah, and some people need opiates to live. Like that is like my own father would not be alive this day if he did not get pain relief from opiates. And, people who have never had to deal with a loved one dealing with chronic disability would never understand that. There are other examples, but it hits a really deep personal point for me of classism, racism, and oh my gosh, we could go down a huge rabbit hole there. But I think the psychedelic professionals who aren't willing to have an openness to, I think a harm reduction lens should just be mandatory. Is my bottom line. You know, I think it's integral. It's integral, and I definitely see organizations like Psychedelics Today really working to put that in the forefront
Thank you.
for the young professionals that come your way.
It's been a hard push, but we've been at it for a long time, and I'm not planning to quit anytime soon.
Long
So when I
time.
see like a lot of these critique organizations that come at the psychedelic world, like what I read from them is we need more drug war. I don't read from them ever, we need more harm reduction, risk reduction,
Yeah.
education. It's like, no, drugs are
Hmm.
bad, psychedelics are bad, everybody should go to jail is kind of how I read folks out there.
Yeah.
And I wish it was not the case that that's what I was reading from them. Some of them do good work some of the time. I just can't, stomach that they're giving the drug war more arguments to exist and get more funding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sincerely.
Mm. So shots fired, folks. Come at
I
me.
mean, God, if that's a shot fired, what am I doing here?
Right? Yes. I'm going to be able to sleep just fine on that one. So hey, let's
Yeah.
get back to our fun list here. So I want to understand like a little bit more about in this space the need for mentorship. It makes a lot of sense for me. Did you read Swimming in the Sacred? Was it Rachel Harris?
I did.
She made a really compelling case for like very aggressive levels of mentorship. I generally speaking appreciated what she was getting at. I just don't know that it's actually going to be possible to achieve what she's talking about at any sort of scale. But how do you like to think about mentorship and why it's important, and how do you want to do mentorship?
I agree with you so deeply. I think that Swimming in the Sacred captured a specific generation. It captured such an important generation of femmes who are facilitating medicine work and have been carrying this torch. I know more than one of the people interviewed in real life,
Mm,
and I will say that I think that uh, Rachel Harris really did a beautiful job at capturing very specific people's stories, and it's in a generation. Um, and I agree that mentorship on a long term level is really necessary. Somewhere on this path, I had someone say to me, learn from people who are way older than you, right? The classic hermit, the sage, the crone, but also learn from people who are two steps ahead of you and two steps behind you. And that for me is what is crucial in mentorship. I come at it with so much humility. But the truth is, I'm only doing it because I get so many people, because I've been beating the same drum for so many years. People being like, hey, what's up? And also my SEO rocks. Psychedelic Art Therapy is a simple, succinct name. So people find me. And I get so many people asking, I'm in school in London and I want to interview you for this research paper that I'm writing about creativity and psychedelics. Or I am thinking about going back to school and I want to do exactly what you do. What do I do? And I've had enough of these people that I'm like, shoot, well, I guess I've accidentally walked myself into a mentorship career. And I love it. Being a therapist is incredibly fulfilling, but it's also very exhausting. And circling back to that point, being able to learn from people who are just like a little bit ahead of you to be like, oh, yeah, when I was doing that, that really sucked. And you kind of just have to figure out, you just have to hire an accountant or like you just have to organize things in a certain way, like whatever it is, having somebody who like knows systems and like is generationally connected to you or can build rapport in a familiar way can be so important. So I think there's a time and place and a season for different types of mentorship. You know,
mm,
there are people in my life that I have had with me since, my really first or second year of psychedelic professionalism, and they're friends, they're chosen family, there's a mentorship element to it. And also, they agreed to work with me when I was a baby. Like the people who have trusted me, I'm mind blown. So, yeah, that feels really important to me that enough people want to ask. So, once again, a group format of like, hey, let's gather. Let's have some time for learning actual art practices. Let's have some time to do some consultation and talk about how are you applying this? How are you using art in your sessions? And how can we workshop this together? It just makes sense to teach people in community because too many individual people ask me, which is such a nice problem to have. And people need it. And I love playing that role. There's just something of getting to model for people curiosity. And like if a problem is coming up, teaching people with my body, like, okay, so how much of that is a me problem and how much of that is a systemic issue? And really learning like what pieces of the laundry are yours. And that can only happen in community when there are witnesses, right? When other people are asking questions and you're encouraging them to get curious about each other. When I was at Naropa, one of the dearest mentors I had, her name was Valerie Lorig. She was a direct student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Naropa is traditionally in a circle. And whenever she would ask a question and a student would respond, this changed me as a facilitator. She would say, don't look at me, talk to them. Talk to your circle. Don't have this just be 10 people having an individual experience with me. Like, talk to your peers. And getting to model that for people of like, yeah, I'm not your fucking teacher. I'm literally some guy. I'm some guy who is obsessed with drugs and obsessed with art, and you're going to be your version of that guy, and we're all just guys. We're just chilling. But in a really sacred way, but like, get your head out of your ass kind of way. Like, let's do this work together. So yeah.
I like that, and I like the non-hierarchical aspect of it too. I think that's super important to feel like a peer. You know, like, let's not discount our value and say, no, oh, you're the expert. Let's say, oh, we all have quite a bit of expertise here. And we're all the world's foremost expert in ourselves. Paraphrase you from earlier.
Oh my gosh. I was like, that's great. I say that. And you're like, yes, you literally said that. It's like a happy puppy.
Yeah. I think I get that from, it might be a Leary thing, but I get it from my mentor, Lenny, from Vermont. So I'm kind of also curious about like creative practices generally. So like what is it about the creative act that's helpful in healing here? Is it like just a different kind of healing state? Is it a rest? What is it? Is it a rebuilding of agency in the individual, or how do you like to think about it?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for this gift of letting me ramble. Buckle the fuck up. For me, it's 101 things, and that's the beauty of it. Um, I had this picturesque moment that feels like it illustrates why I do what I do, and then I'll give you my clinical answer, okay? So I was coming down from a very large mescaline experience, and my friend that I was journeying with had said to me, you've been internal for most of the day. Have you thought about revisiting the art project that you started earlier in the day? And I was like, oh, damn, okay, I was just actually in the presence of God, and I probably should do that. So I get my little body up, I get my little blanket, I sit down on my meditation cushion, and then I look at my art, and it was the feeling of like coming home and like opening the door to the warmest mother. And I'm just like, oh, there you are. And I realized that that was the culmination of showing the fuck up to my creative practice in good days and bad days. So I'm sort of tapping on a bit of that animism, an animistic perspective, that like, or a really
The whole world
relational,
being alive.
transpersonal. Yeah.
Animism and relational is like super important. We kind of like in our world, we bundle that all together with a process thought lately. It's all kind of one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're actually pretty nuanced. They're actually pretty separate and nuanced. But I see the creative practice as a vessel of connection to my inner world. That no matter what, if I am listening to my body's impulses, I'm getting out of my head. That the more that I'm strengthening my creative muscle, it's such a transferable skill. And I will touch on the application of psychedelics and creativity, but just purely talking about having a creative practice. It can be what they would call in the field of art therapy regression in service of the ego. Kids are just creative. They want to sing, they want to perform, they want to dance, they want to make art. And then we just sort of stop. And there's something about being able to have corrective experiences of regression. That's really what I was highlighting when I was talking about the ketamine groups and why we do art in groups. But so there's that opportunity. And with enough time, it becomes a way that you can be known. It becomes a way to really challenge your mind. it becomes a way to like have a safe haven. That's truly what I have noticed about, I'd say for the last, just about concurrently, I began a meditation practice. I got serious about my art practice and I started doing psychedelics. So I'm hitting
Solid.
about, I mean, I know, 17-year-old me knew what they were doing and I respect them very hard. Um, but if you ask me what I wanted to do in first grade, there's textbook proof of this. I wanted to make art and help people. So it's been a forever thing.
Mm.
But there's just something about coming back to that, coming back to yourself, that in bad days it's there, in good days it's there. And it's about trusting the body. It's a great way to build community. It's a great way to have sensory needs met. Art therapy as a field does a really beautiful job at creating different ways of conceptualizing what art materials really work for what neuroses, what phase of life you're in, what you're wanting to work on. And that is one of my greatest joys, is helping people find what creative practice works for you. And like, if it is gluing macaroni to lampshades and it lights you the fuck up, people are gonna love that. It's one of my favorite things, is helping people, and psychedelics really help with this, helping people break through the veil of just trust your impulses. That if you are, that artistic sublimation, the process of taking whatever is happening inside and allowing art to be a vehicle to have it on the outside, that is nervous system regulation. That is psychic healing. Just to be like, I kind of want to do that. And just trusting that. It seems like such a small act, but it's such a big deal. And it has like the amount of like grief and transformation and loss that I have been through in the last couple of years is unprecedented for my life, on a
Mm.
personal level, on a collective level. And my art practice has really kept me afloat, truly. So would it be okay if I talked a little bit about the, like, where psychedelics come into that?
Please.
Okay, cool. I'm doing a lot of talking, but
I'm into it. You're the guest.
I feel very welcome. So specifically with psychedelics, the metaphor that I use very often is that art is helping us create the map of our psyche, and psychedelics are giving us wider access to that landscape. And there, it feels like a match made in heaven for me. There are amazing people who did work around this in the 60s. There was um, Oscar Honegger. I never know if it's Janiger
Yoniger.
or
Yeah.
Honegger. Yoniger? Janiger.
Fuck, I forget. Yeah.
But you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a big deal in LA, right?
Yeah, he fed
Mm-hmm.
LSD to 900 people and just studied
Mm.
creativity.
Mm-hmm.
When Stan Groff was working out of Spring Grove over here, I mean, throughout actually his whole practice, he was collecting mandalas from people. That art is an integral part of holotropic breathwork. And I would not be a good future ancestor if I didn't point out that indigenous communities have been using art as a technology with non-ordinary states for millennia. And that it's not mine and it's not ours, but the people before us have been doing
Mm-hmm.
this, and they knew, and they were right. I recently I was getting a Weechel yarn art for someone as a holiday gift, and I had never taken the time to study like the immaculate ritual that goes into this yarn art. So like, yeah. Anyways, tiny rant there. I mean, this whole thing is a tiny rant, Alyssa. But there are so many reasons why I think psychedelics and art therapy, or the creative process, pair well together, because I want this to be as accessible for people as possible. Just the process of staying engaged with your process, the process of staying engaged with your creative experience is it's just a gift to your future self. Like the amount of journals that I have from a decade of different psychedelic experiences, falling in love, going through heartbreak, losing mentors in my life, having loved ones die, having loved ones kill themselves, and be able to be like, whoa, look at that theme that I was working on for 8 months. That is in all of my art, the specific iconography. And I think that I have a really special gift as an art therapist of knowing how to engage with my own imagery in a nonviolent way. I say nonviolent because I think when we jump to symbol interpretation, this is what this means, we're actually robbing a symbol of its mood, context, and scene, you could say. That like a symbol has this capacity to become such a rich landscape. And when we want to just jump to this is what this means, we rob it of so much. So I have that gift as an art therapist, but the fact that you can have a very long data trail of tracking your own process, the fact that it is a way to actually check in with yourself. Like, what am I needing? What am I doing? What do I want to do? It's an incredibly special process.
Mm.
And I could teach about this in depth. So I can pause there and see if there's reflections, curiosity from you.
You know, you and I have a lot of overlap, so it's always fun. Like, as soon as I heard the word symbol, my mind falls down the most gigantic rabbit hole. And as you're fleshing it out, you're right. Like symbols in many ways are quite alive and deep. And thinking about, my mind immediately goes like sigils and all that kind of fun stuff. But like, I'm thinking like in a therapy or
Yes.
like psychedelic context, like, oh, an owl shows up. Owl means X. It's like, well, maybe, but like,
To who?
there's so
To
much depth
who?
there, right? And like, yeah, it could mean, depending on your tradition, it could have so many meanings. And interpreting somebody's symbols for them is one of the bigger faux pas here, I think, in our space. And I don't know. This is where I run up into issues with people who are, operating like a shaman or a magician. I'm like, yeah, sure, man, but like, why do you think your symbol set's so relevant to them? Just because you're so in tune with your spirits or something? Like, I don't understand how they can be so certain, if that makes sense. And I do like to conflate shamanism with magicianship a little bit, because it's like two sides of the same coin, but it also deflates it a little bit. So I find that
Yeah,
helpful.
totally. I respect that viewpoint. Um, I mean it when I say that it's an act of violence to do that. I
Mm.
think in this culture, in this specific time, in my specific orientation, that is how I view that. I want to honor that there could be, a cultural context in which, like I've been learning a bit more about Jewish mysticism. I feel like I should put in parentheses there. I'm hardcore an anti-Zionist Jew. As we're touching on Judaism, just naming that. So I've been studying Jewish mysticism, and there is in the dream work, because there's in the Old Testament, there's so many different revelations that come through dreams. And there is a little bit more of a cultural container for if this comes to you in a dream, it means this. And some people really connect with that. But I think in this cultural context, like we don't need to do that. There's actually so much more empowerment. So a great example, I have people in my life who love lucid dreaming. And I come from the lens of exactly what we're talking about. We are doing dream interpretation through helping people connect with their own symbolism. And I treat art the same way I treat dreams. This is a complex landscape, and we're going to pull through this together, but you're going to guide. I'm going to be behind you, pointing you in gentle directions, but you are taking the first steps. So some people don't give a fuck about dream interpretation. They care about being present in the lucid dream, and that is the healing nature of it. That like what it means doesn't matter. The healing vehicle is actually in the being, that central state of being. And for some people in their cultural context, being able to receive that symbolism, having somebody else do the work for you, connects them to that greater sense of something bigger. And if that feels true to them, who am I to say that? But I think there's something about consent. If people aren't fully consenting to what does this cultural context say about dreams? Or what does this person, that it would really help me connect to my truth if that person tells me. Because when somebody else is trying to tell you your own truth, that is the workings of a cult. That is the workings of an abuse of power. When people aren't being empowered to trust their own intuition, to trust their own world. I've been doing a lot of work at the intersection of cult deprogramming, and it's so wild to see all of the different traits. And I'm like, whoa, if that person was given a platform, that could get real ugly real quick, or people could get really hurt, and maybe people are getting really hurt.
Oh,
And
they
that's
are.
why I think right? That's why the peer support model, or like, even though I'm a therapist, I'm a government sponsored researcher, I am as above the board as you can be. But at the same time, it's about harm reduction. It's about peer support. It's about helping people connect to their own wisdom. And that's a hill
Mm,
I'll die on, truly.
mm.
So that long answer, for some people, maybe that's going to work. But if even if like you and I, for example, agree that telling people about their own dreams is kind of sus, it's kind of not a good thing. But if somebody's into it, maybe that works for them. You know, I don't think it's a good idea, but maybe they need that at that time. Was that person given the option of, what is your own relationship with this, or do you want me to tell you mine?
Mm-hmm. Right. There's so many directions I want to go in, but let's stay on point here. So, um, I want to talk a little bit about Rick Rubin. You brought him up earlier, and I think he's getting a lot of press lately. So, co-founder
Yeah,
of Def Jam Records, former president of Columbia Records, which is gigantic, of course. But like, he wrote a book on creativity. Is it called The Creative Process or The Creative Act?
it's called the creative act. Yeah.
Yeah. What is it about Rick Rubin right now that's like speaking to you?
Okay, so number one, it's because he's weird. I love weird people. God, it makes me and my weirdness feel so held and safe and seen. Um, it's also that he's prolific. I've been listening to more of his interviews, and even the way he carries his voice, the way that he's so committed to self that he knows who he is, he knows what he's doing, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, oh gosh, there's so many things I want to say. I read The Creative Act in one sitting.
Mm.
That's another book that I sat down and was like, I'll read a little bit before bed. Um, it's just, I think that there's something about people who accidentally walk themselves into spirituality. So, similarly, I'm pretty sure he's a Jew from New York. I don't know what it is about Jews from New York and doing this esoteric, creative doula shepherdship, but I'm so into it. There's such an air of softness, and I don't think he can even play an instrument. I don't think he can even play an instrument, but he is a prolific recording artist, and so much of it comes down to creativity being a spiritual act and it being a way to cultivate presence. I mean, it's on my sacred shelf right next to the Bhagavad Gita. So if
Mm.
that tells you anything, it is
Wow.
like, yeah. Okay, so a super funny fact, because I feel like I've been incredibly serious and like a little strong on my like social justice shit. And that's good. That's good. I'm really glad. I always want to use a platform for spreading messages that I care about. But one of my favorite things is that he's gotten me back into pro wrestling
Rick
to the
Rubin.
point, yes, to the point that one of my best friends for my birthday got us tickets to pro wrestling. And
Oh
like,
my gosh.
I can't wait.
Those
So,
people are such hard workers. It's fascinating. And I can't not even imagine their embodied chronic pain just for like the lack of rest they get. It's unbelievable.
yeah.
But what amazing performers, honestly.
So I think the piece that has really stuck out to me about his viewpoint on wrestling is that it is hyper real in a way that things like media and news, we all know. There's not, we all know, dear God. Um, Lots of us have a general understanding that media is warped, that media is displaying a specific viewpoint. And it's either not true on a semantic level, or it's just straight up lies. And that like media is a tool for social engineering. But the news, we're sold to believe this is what's happening in the world, that it is telling you on a surface level that it is real, and we all know that it's not real. But wrestling is the exact opposite. So it's hyper real in a way that it's telling us it. We know that it's. Is it real? Is it not real? Like it plays with that dance of reality in such a stunning way, and he calls it the modern American opera. And I am obsessed with that
Whoa.
viewpoint.
What a weird and interesting perspective.
Obsessed.
Um, yeah. Yeah. How do we? Well, there's a lot there. So you're going to go on acid?
Oh my gosh, great question. TBD.
Mm-hmm.
I've been having this weird thing though that I wholeheartedly enjoy being of service, and I love being able to share the gospel of creativity and drugs with the world. But I can go in public high less and less.
Mm-hmm.
I can go in public high less and less, and it is unfortunate because boy is that fun. But I'll report back.
Can't wait to hear. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Like, I try my best to keep it really specific when I do that kind of stuff. Wrestling, I don't know if it's on the top of my list, but you know, if I had like the most, you know, if I had that kind of fan relationship, perhaps, you know.
You know, maybe in and of itself, it is a non-ordinary state.
Hmm.
Just going. Maybe that in and of itself will be a non-ordinary state.
I like to do things sober first, mostly, but
Right?
you know, I don't have that kind of guts. A lot of people have. So that's super interesting. So earlier you were saying I think before we started recording, talking about Rick Rubin and how like the whole way through he's not talking about psychedelics at all, but the way he's speaking about the creative process can be overlapped so well to our psychedelic arena. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Totally. So unfortunately, I'm out of state and I don't have the book in front of me. Otherwise, you would see like 50 tabs of my favorite chapters that I've highlighted. But he, in a very diligent way, goes through many principles that are really well aligned for psychedelic professionals. So a good example is I know he talks about beginner's mind, distraction, can I remember awareness, resistance, you know, these really key themes and just small perspectives. I know we were talking about doing a live stream too, so I'd be happy to make sure I have that book with me.
Cool.
Even though I know it quite well at this point, but I'm actually starting, this is something I'm so excited about, in I haven't known how to like get into the whole Reels thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be working on an art project and reading people excerpts from that book just as a way to make content. So people can also hear me. And just like of the small hope that one day Rick Rubin is like, yeah, you're super fucking cool. So
Could
I don't
happen.
want to do it for the attention, but I want to just make videos reading it to people. One, because it's a perfect book. And if I could just, I've said this for years, Joe, if I could be somewhere in between, like a Mr. Rogers and an Anne Shulgin, I'd be the happiest boy on earth. And like reading people this book feels like that. So in short, he does a fantastic job at isolating really specific traits that are great for, you know, the holy surrender, whether that surrender is drug based, whether it is being with the intensity of the creative process. Yeah.
It's Mr. Rogers and who else?
And Shulgin.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm down. That'd be lovely.
Right? I'm saying that.
I was watching Mr. Rogers like congressional testimony not that long ago. It's fucking like
Oh my
heart
God.
melting. Right?
And it's like that was his character. I don't know who Fred Rogers was as a person, but just that like that softness, that sweetness will read you a story. Will read you a story, truly.
Mm-hmm. So, last important thing I want to talk about is this, like, a little bit more on community. And we kind of covered it earlier, but I think we could do a little bit more on, like, outside of like a deliberate kind of art therapy, psychedelic therapy container. But like, what is it? What does it mean to be in community? Like, why do we need community, and like, how can we be in community?
I think that is a question that could be an entire podcast in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Let's do a
What it,
couple high kicks before we like kind of
absolutely.
pass on it, though.
Totally. No. I'm on it. The little Alyssas are running through all the files in my brain as we speak on my little Rolodexes. I mean, we're wired for connection. We are wired to be like, we need relationships. We need things like connection and physical touch. So that's just sort of a baseline fact for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that especially in a world that is full of a lot of disconnection, a lot of isolation, genocide, violence, to have people who can resonate with who you are and say that, like, no, I fully trust that this isn't, that you're not being lazy, that you're actually feeling the grief of the world. And it's okay to be tired, or, just the simple things of, I think that my viewpoint comes from many years of practicing different forms of non-monogamy, that intimacy in its truest sense is a healing agent. Like, being able to know that care and support isn't just reserved for a romantic relationship, that like I can buy my friends random gifts because they reminded me of them, or it's actually totally okay to ask my friends to hold me and watch a movie with me. That like there's a certain sense of, I've lived in New York and Boulder and Portland, so I've lived in very hippie adjacent, more liberal, gushy spaces, you could say. And I have a deep bias towards intimacy being just one of the reasons for being alive.
Mm.
Um, so I think that there's something about validation. There's something about being able to get your needs met. There's something about being able to practice things like shadow work. There's something about being able to create corrective experiences. I feel like that's a theme that I've touched on a couple times. Relationship as corrective experience. That's one that's really important to me. And that takes having trusted people. I'm in a really, an adorably tight-knit social group for the first time in my life at almost 30. And seeing the way that it's like, no, we've like been through, like, I've seen your shadow and I still love you. Like, there are a lot of ways that like that didn't get to take up space in my family of origin. And people who will support me, who will meet me at my love languages. And I hope that other people find that too. But I also come from a bias of having really skewed views on the importance of things like community and intimacy. So I think
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of that, I gave a really succinct list.
Yeah,
That's in there. It's there.
it's a lot I can relate to there. And I think some of what you said there definitely relates back to group process more generally, but also, yeah, like
Yes.
part of this project, I think we're all kind of on to reform society in a way that's more compatible with human nervous systems, and
Yeah.
as opposed to whatever the hell we have today, which is more of yeah, I don't want to name it exactly, but it's not healthy.
No.
Whatever we're doing today. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I guess any kind of like words of inspiration for people who want to get involved in our kind of like art spaces, psychedelic spaces, things like this.
This comes from a recovering perfectionist. So don't be afraid to fuck up. And it really has to be like a rhizome. It really has to be interdependent with other people. Um, Catch yourself when you want to fall into extractivism, when you want to see people as levels up, that like you do your best when you are nourishing each other, when you are in relationship, and it takes time. I'm privileged enough to get to be in community with Alex and Allison Gray. And something that Allison said always really stays with me of everybody's got their own seat on the bus. That like maybe this isn't your bus. And don't be of I would say don't be afraid, but also have the humility to sit with that possibility. That not everybody needs to be a psychedelic therapist. It's actually a hard job. It's a very, very hard job to be a psychedelic therapist specifically. But, are there creative ways to see what your involvement can look like? So just do it. Start building relationships, but like see it as it's a career that is always going to be really messy and kind of like a path more than just a traditional career. At least through my viewpoint. I'm a double Naropa grad. I have been coming at it through this lens, and it has been the most fulfilling thing. Like I have made truly lifelong friends and do work that fills my soul. And it's because I prioritize the relationships and knowing myself first and kind of led from there. So just go for it. Just go to the event. Just talk to people. And like the weirder you are, the more liked you're going to be. That's been working for me this whole time. They're really working for me to just be authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just get started, folks. It's awesome. The water's fine, mostly. And
Mostly.
yeah. And yeah, okay, so how can people find you online, socials and website?
Yes. Psychedelic Art Therapy is me. Well,
I
like I
still
said
love that you have that
before,
domain.
I feel like you were around when I first got it, and that's pushing on many years, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
So on Instagram, Alyssa as a separate being is mycelial Alyssa. Honestly, shout out to Justin Beretta for thinking of that. I can never change my Instagram handle because it's perfect. So mycelial Alyssa. It works. You'll have it typed out. But the Instagram page that I'm working to nurture right now is Psychedelic Art Therapy. And my website is the same. So yeah, I am in a phase of really creating a lot of space to build relationships with people. So the door's open.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
Alyssa, thanks so much for doing this. I think we'll do a live stream in about a week from now. Today is actually MLK Day here in the United States. So about a week from MLK Day, we'll be recording. It'll be really fun. And hopefully we can do more because you're obviously up to a lot of stuff and we have a lot of alignment. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a treat to just grow alongside you for so many years.
It's a fun project. And yeah, I'm so happy to know you're out there. So thank you. And
Right back at you.
let's do more.
Yeah.